Nice to be here again. Yeah, can you put a price tag on open source? First is, who am I? Hi, I work for Kubermatic as a customer delivery architect, and I'm also the tech lead for SIG ContainerDays comms, and I'm part of the Kate's infra team for Kubernetes. What do I do at Kubernetes? It's easy. I make stupid ideas, as I write there. So we said that, hey, birthday is coming up, 10-year anniversary. Let's put in the birthday of the anniversary inside of the Twitter account, because then we get these nice balloons. This is how it started. This is how it ended. The reason why, apparently you can't have an account on Twitter that when you're not older than 13, and as we know, 10th anniversary, we are not old enough. So I got our Kubernetes.io account banned. That is what I do at the Kubernetes project. But can you put a price tag on open source? Yes. There was a paper published. It's the value of open source software. It was written by Manuel Hoffmann, Frank Nagle, and Yanu Su, and I'm sorry for butchering all of those names. And the amount is 8.8 trillion US dollars. So that was the talk. Thanks. Bye. But honestly, yeah, maybe. How did they get those numbers? There's a method that is called COCOMO, which is a constructive cost model too, and it provides a structured way to calculate the effort of a repository based on lines of code, and then you can add modifiers that basically say experienced developers, low maintenance, high maintenance. We have other packages that we need to consider into this, and then you put in a base salary, and then it spits out a number. So why did they choose this model? They choose this model because it was already used, for example, by the US Department of Defense to estimate projects, to get a price tag behind what they did. It is highly flexible because you can add a lot of parameters into it and transformations into it, and it basically helps you to estimate how much people do I need or would I need to find a similar project and stuff like this. And as I said, there's a formula. Do I have a pointer? I don't have a pointer. But the formula basically says it's the number of code, and you can add modifiers. So let's take a look where I know a little bit of. Let's take a look into Kubernetes, how this looks like. Some quick facts, and I'm sorry, but those facts are 3 months old, so they are not the latest facts. I'm really sorry, and it's not quite accurate because OpenHub is missing some information. So OpenHub is a project where you can basically see the health of open source projects. You can see statistics of this, and it calculates a number based on the COCOMO 2 model. So when we have a look at Kubernetes, we have 36 million lines of code. We have 259 repositories in Kubernetes and SIG Kubernetes, which is a lot. And all of this stuff, there's something in it. And we had 527,000 commits by 14,000 contributors. So if a single person would build this, it would take them 21,000 years. Good luck. So that's the number that I calculated that was calculated based on the COCOMO thing when we add a 70K base salary. So I looked around what are base salaries all around the world, and we basically have in Germany, it's for a Golang developer, it's between 60 to 80,000 euros. Dollars. We're only talking dollars here. In the US, it's 95 to 130, but when we go in other parts of the world, it's only $25,000, $30,000. So this would be the estimated value. As you can see, this number is really small compared to the 8.8 billion that we had before. So Kubernetes would only be a small part of the whole conglomerate of things. So let's have a look at Kubernetes in detail. That's basically the commits over the month. So we can see there was like growing, but now we are a little bit stagnating. The lines of code, there's a weird spike that I still didn't figure out why it is there, but we will find. And when we get the latest statistics, so when we just look 1 year back, it's going down. And if something is going down, that's usually not as you would like it. So we went down for people that are actively contributing, and it went down for commits. And I mean, there are different reasons for this. Big companies cut back on their open source development, funding got reduced. Also, a good thing is Kubernetes is getting mature, so you don't need so much new stuff in there, so it's like a process that is also good. So it's being stable. So we are moving in a good direction there, but still, less contributors is always bad. So when we go back to the paper, what basically does it tell us? So we have the costs that we need to count. In this model, so we have in the paper it says that you would spend as a company 3.5 times more money on software if open source software weren't around. So if you would need to license everything that you have. And the biggest part of those, we saw the number of Kubernetes and we saw the general number. The biggest part of open source projects is languages. They take up 85% on demanded value for open source. So we are talking here about Go, PHP, C, C++, and so on and so on. That's the biggest part of the open source contribution because everyone is forgetting about this, but it's the one that is the most interesting. And the value of open source software is way higher in companies if they would need it to pay for it than they would get out of it if they just would support open source. Also, the good thing is there's so much open source projects that have various implementations. So, who of you is not using an open source project? You see? Everyone is using open source because there's always a small part that is open source. And we need to, the main key point about the paper was, okay, we need also to recognize and support those languages. But when we move forward, can we really calculate a project based on lines of code? Probably not. Because we have hidden costs, and those hidden costs are not accountable. And this adds on top of the value of the things, because you have meetings in open source projects. You have non-code contributions that are also really, really important for those projects. And especially also for the Kubernetes project, you need some infrastructure to run tests, to run builds, to have your PRAO, so your CI/CD pipeline running somewhere. So you need also some funding to run all those stuff. So when we take a look at the Kubernetes project again, a huge part of it is meetings. I opened up yesterday evening the calendar for this week. So this is the snapshot from this week. And this week alone, the Kubernetes project, based on the calendar that everyone can see at kubernetes.dev, we have 37 meetings. And in those meetings are between 4 to 10 people in each of them. And then you need to calculate them. They're running an hour, then you need to pay also this hour, and so on and so on. We have a lot of non-code contributions, which is still some not codified or not codified infrastructure maintenance. We need communication, like people discussing stuff in Slack, people organizing the contributor summit. It's also some time that needs to be invested. We have GitHub management, we have governance, we have policies, we have the steering committee that needs to decide on topics in meetings and stuff like this. And of course, and that's the biggest chunk additionally on this, we have the infrastructure. I didn't put up the usage of those. So this is basically what the Kubernetes project gets. But this is not what we use. But we are close to a lot of those things. For example, 2 years ago, the Kubernetes infrastructure used more than 3 million in GCP, but there weren't yet AWS credits around. But it's basically 2.6 million we will end up probably by the end of this year spent in GCP. We will also end up by 2.3 million in AWS. And this is just for building Kubernetes binaries, building, running the infrastructure, tests, running the Pro jobs. A huge chunk of this whole thing is the 5,000 node scale test. So as you know, Kubernetes supports 5,000 nodes officially, so we need to test this. So we have a test that is running once a day to see if Kubernetes can support 5,000 nodes based on the merges that came into the code. And this also costs money because it's 5,000 nodes that are being spun up. We also need to, who is not using, let me rephrase this, who is not using the official registry to download Kubernetes binaries? I like you. Why? When you read the documentation of Kubernetes, there's something written that says, please have a mirror in place of your infrastructure to utilize when you deploy clusters and stuff like this, and do not rely on an always uptime for the Kubernetes registry. Because that's not the point for the registry, that every cluster update or something like this, it's going to be downloaded there. Because the community needs to pay for the traffic. So that's something to keep in mind. And I was pinged last week by a friend of mine and said like, hey, why do I get now images from AWS and not from GCP? Yeah, because the registry changed. It's now a multi-cloud registry. So we pull things from AWS or from GCP based on where you are running it. And yeah, but we can't whitelist AWS things because, I don't know. Yeah, that's not our problem. That's not our problem as a project. Because get the image, if you want the image, it's all, you could also compile it by yourself if you like to. Anyway, so, can we not now calculate the worth of an open source project? It's hard. It's also hard to basically get the value for an open source project and convey this to your business or to your teams. Who of you can actively contribute to an open source project? That's not much. That's really not much. I know that a couple of Kubernetes contributors are in the audience, and I'm glad that they raised at least a hand. So, when we have a statistic, and this was published by Google last year, we have basically 52% of the people that they ask can contribute in personal and in professional time to not Kubernetes, but to open source. And 30% can only contribute only in their professional time, which is fine, but we still have 18% that are contributing in their personal time. So they do this out of good merit. So, too long, didn't listen. I wrote it wrong, so yeah. TLDL. A lot of folks like contributing to open source because it's fun, you learn a lot, you get to know various people. However, they would like to get paid for this because they do valuable work that gives companies something to rely on and to earn money with the software, so they also should get paid for this. So, when you have an interview with a new company, the new question that you always should ask, can you tell me about your open source strategy? That's horrible for any recruiter, and that's also horrible for most of the people that you will run into. But the critical step when you want to establish open source in your company is that you basically create a strategy document or a strategy plan to have an organizational, how do I run open source inside of my company? So, who needs to be part of this? And that's now getting really interesting because people in there have different motivations. So we have in one side, we have leadership with VPs, C, put whatever we have in there, and SVPs and so on. They are mostly concerned about growth of the company, health of the company, how it gets bigger, and how we have low risks, and how we prioritize our investments. So they usually don't care about open source. Then we have product owners. Product owners they want to build the best product, they want to be the best user-friendly thing that you can ever have, and they also are not interested in open source. I'm sorry. We have your managers. Managers might be interested in open source, but only because they see that you like contributing to open source. So basically the only person that cares about open source is developers. That's bad. So why do we need now a strategy paper? There was a nice quote, and this is published on the Linux Foundation website. There's also a guide for setting up an open source strategy, and it was created by Ibrahim Haddad. If you do not start with the high-level consensus, driving agreement on the details of the policy and on investment of the process tends to be very hard, if not impossible. So if you not start on the very, very top to include them in how we approach open source in our company, you will not succeed. So, as we said, different people want different things, but also the difference is between the company and the developer. So the company wants cost savings, faster time to market, high quality code, they want to be flexible, they want to have influence on the roadmap of open source projects. That's not how it works. I mean, there is politics in open source projects, and you will never eliminate this because there are a lot of companies that have influence on open source projects, but there are also methods of preventing that one part gets too big. For example, we have currently steering election of the Kubernetes project, so I think 4 seats are open, and there is a voting committee that makes sure that not every candidate is from the same company, that there's a maximum of 2 people from the same company instead of steering, so that you don't have a weight on the projects. What developers want is, we want an open platform, we want to have trustworthy platform, and that's also why things like, I think last Friday, Elastic announced that it's open source again. Yeah, good luck earning that trust back. And that's also a problem with all of the projects that happened, we are no longer open source. Best example, Terraform and OpenTofu. Well, things that happen. So developers do not tend to trust when companies fuck up open source projects. So we need a strategy. We need a strategy how we get through this and how we create basically a paper that also gives us the return of investment that we have. So what we need to do is we need to get leaders, and I mean now VP, CIO, and so on, excited and involved to show them the benefits that they have if they have an open source strategy. We need to get buy-ins from different parts of the company, because usually it's like, yeah, large enterprise companies, and they all need to get into like, hey, this benefits our company, and we need all of the departments to say, yeah, that's a cool idea. Also, we need to explain or this paper is there to explain how the company is approaching open source. And it also helps inside of the company internal projects to make better decisions regarding the usage of open source software or how they would support it. For example, if I rely heavily on an open source project, maybe it's worth if I have an engineer that is contributing to it, because the engineer then also knows the deep insides and outsides of this project. So, getting to our return of investment. What is the return of investment? We have cost savings, because the open source tends to be free. It's not free, but you don't have a licensing on it. You can get support for a lot of open source projects, so you can buy support if you can't do it by yourself. You have also the benefit of collaboration. You get input, you get other views. I mean, one of the best things is you're here. This is a conference. This is a conference about cloud native and container software. Most of the cloud native and container software is open source. So the open source community is already giving you back insights from different other projects. And you reduce your vendor lock-in if you adopt open source software, and you can avoid to be tied to a single vendor. And the most important thing that most of the companies ignore is employee branding. So you can retain talents if they have some time to work on an open source project, because it's different from their day-to-day work. They can make an impact, they can further and deepen their skills, and it's opening up other channels. It's opening up other talents that come to you. Why do I say this? I'm sorry. This is our marketing slide. This is the first marketing slide that we have in our pre-sales slide deck. And we actively advertise that we are the #1 committer for the Kubernetes project in Europe. And we can prove this by dev stats. So CNCF is providing dev stats, so you can basically see how much contributions have been done to any of the CNCF projects. And there you can see where a company is raging. And it's handling like people that change companies and so on and so forth. So basically, I can prove and I can advertise that I am a contributor to open source, because this also says that we know Kubernetes, because we have people that do Kubernetes in Kubernetes, right? So, but now it's like, I'm an end user. We are an end user company. We don't do, what? We don't do product. End users can also benefit from this. So you as an end user also can benefit from the different parts of how open source is working. So it helps you to diversify and adopt perspective, because you get input from new fields. You can contribute to projects and basically directly impact the way how it's working. And the contribution is a contribution always code? Yes or no? Yes? No, okay. So a contribution is raising an issue that a feature is not working, or a feature should work in a different way. And we have the main problem in the Kubernetes project. You always see like alpha, something, feature A goes in alpha, feature B goes in beta. And everyone is like, no, we can't use a beta feature because it's not stable. The problem is, the Kubernetes project doesn't get input on this beta feature because no one is using the beta feature because it's a beta feature. So, use beta features, use alpha features, don't be afraid, give feedback on those, because that's the point where you can change a feature, where you can adopt a feature, where you can say, okay, we thought that this works a little bit different. So advertisement 1.31 is out, and alpha, one of the alpha features is basically using an image as a volume. Use it. Give feedback on this. That's what the project is also needing. End user feedback, what works, what doesn't work. There's something called CAPS in the Kubernetes project. CAPS is basically the idea of we propose something how we want how something should work, and you can basically see when the cap is moving into alpha, into beta, what's the plan on moving this. You can read all of this stuff up. Everything is in the Kubernetes repository. Use this if you want to influence how your path there goes. And what you also can do is you can do financial support, right? So you can basically give money to either CNCF or support a company that does open source contributions or anything in this direction. So with this, thank you, really now. And I have an invite for you on Tuesday, the 17th at 10:30 a.m. Central European Time, or 8 a.m. Pacific Time. There's going to be a new meeting, and the new meeting is from the SIG contributor experience of Kubernetes, where we have an orientation meeting, how you could contribute to Kubernetes as a project. I will be running the APAC friendly one, so the 10:30 a.m. Central Europe time. How to join, how to get the invite. The appointment is not yet in the calendar, but it will be either today or tomorrow. Join the Google Groups link, then you get the invite to the calendar. With this, thanks everyone, and we are done for conference, Container Days. Yay!
Thank you, Mario. Thanks, Mario. Not exactly, because I have a few questions for you. But again, really interesting talk. So the first one would be, do you think companies that exclusively produce open source software, excluding HashiCorp and Elasticsearch before the license changes, are viable in the long term?
Yeah. Because a lot of companies that are purely open source are still around. There is when you look at SUSE, SUSE has also Rancher with it. Kubermatic is we have also an open core product that is open source, so that all of our products are open core at least. Red Hat has open source offerings. They're basically every bigger company does exactly this strategy.
Yep, fully agree. Okay, so this one you kind of touched upon. I'm going to leave it out, but if you want, you can always ask Mario later after drinks. Can you explain what the languages being 84% of value means, or where it comes from?
So as I mentioned, the first thing that I posted were this paper that was published in the beginning of the year, and the amount of values, like how much an open source project is used compared to the other open source projects, language are used the most. And because language are used the most, 84% of the value is languages, because they are moved everywhere. Like if Kubernetes, for example, is using Golang, so it's already the value of Kubernetes would add to the value of Golang and so on.
Yeah, all projects are going to be written in some kind of language or another, so obviously they're adding value to that language. With so much emphasis on open source, on OSS, why does OSS community use so much non-OSS tech, such as GitHub, Google stuff?
That's an interesting question.
Instead of alternatives.
That's an interesting question, and the funny thing is, we use GKE for the main Pro build cluster. So our main Pro build cluster is running on GKE. Why do we use GKE? Because GKE is a managed Kubernetes cluster, so we can open a support ticket at Google if something goes in the cluster wrong, so we don't have to take care of it. So it's less work on the open source maintainers.
Yeah, fight your battles of where you want to put your effort.
Exactly.
Do you want to put your effort on managing your own Git source, so that obviously. So cool. And this one was a comment. Some companies started to publish an open source manifesto. I don't know if you want to comment on that.
Yeah, that's true, and that's also how it should work. And I mean, there are some, even in the government, for example, the state of Schleswig-Holstein, so northern Germany, replaces 30,000 Windows machines with Linux, starting soon.
Yeah, I actually... I had no clue what you said there for a minute because my German is useless, but I actually read something about moving to Linux within the German government, which also shows the power of open source.
Exactly.
And on that note, thank you very much, Mario, again.